Hello and welcome to the Happiness Is podcast with me, your host, Bruce Aitchison from Happiness Egg-Shaped, and we go far, far away again today. Someone that I don't know, but I feel like I do because of that wonderful thing that we call social media. We share some people. We've got some people in common, as is always the case in this tiny rugby village that we inhabit for a little while. And a man with big aspirations, huge inspiration to many people. I do not know how to introduce this guy. I've thought about it, believe it or not. I do put some thought into this. I reckon he's a student of the game, he's an ambassador of the game, but most of all, he's a champion of the game. He's somebody who uses this game to make lives better, to give people opportunities, to build those relationships, share experiences, and make the memories that we all treasure. I'm delighted that he's given up some time. He's a podcaster himself. He's a coach. He's been a player, and he continues to be very, very busy. So he doesn't have a huge amount of time. So stop talking, Bruce, and get him in here. The one and the only Mr. Robin MacDowell. Hello, sir.
Good morning, Bruce, or afternoon. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very well, and I'm delighted to have you with us. You are a busy, busy man.
Just thankful to do what I love every day. And in North America, to work for yourself in the sport of rugby is quite rare. So you have to wear about 10,000 hats.
And you've got the MacDowell rugby hat on, looking very cool today. Well logoed up, but you're busy today. You are working today.
Yeah, we got a summer camp. We kind of run a yearly summer camp. I run one of my own, I guess, for MacDowell Rugby. And then I've been on the road guest coaching in other clubs around Canada this year. And I was hoping to fit in a few more, but likely when the rains hit the West Coast on Vancouver Island, I'll get back on the trail with the clubs.
So life is busy, and being on the trail is something that you've done for a very long time. But I am interested because to many people that listen to this, Canada, I hate this phrase, but that tier two, rugby's not the main game. There's a whole load of other things in line. What was it that captured you in the game?
It's always that those one or two teachers, coaches that get their hooks into you. And actually, two of my dad's brothers were rugby guys, and the West Coast, Vancouver Island specifically, is rich with rugby. There's a strong rugby culture, probably the strongest in North America. And so I'm lucky there. Obviously, we have Scottish weather on Vancouver Island, those that haven't been to the West Coast. So we don't get much snow. We get some snow. It's pretty wet. It lasts for a day. But outside of that, we can play 12 months a year. So that's obviously conducive to rugby. But yeah, my uncles were pretty well established in the game. They represented the Vancouver Island Crimson Tide, which is a representative team that's known around the world. And so I had a couple of heroes to look up to, I guess, at a young age. And then, I got drug out to the rugby club once, and that was a scary thing for a Canadian ice hockey baseball player. And I never looked back. So I'm just really thankful that I found this sport and this family. And just growing up playing ice hockey as well, like it's a beautiful game. There's nothing like it. But the culture of ice hockey for me is not that of rugby, and I think that's what makes rugby so special. So I tried to be, I think I was a decent hockey player on the ice, but off the ice, like I tried to be a hockey player, but that didn't really fit my how I was raised and who I was. And rugby, obviously we just left it on the field, and it was really family, as we always talk about, and why we're still here doing it. But for me, it was really that sold me on it, the people, the places, and the things.
I find that really fascinating because obviously hockey is the Canadian game. Uh, and then you have baseball, you have gridiron, you have all those other things that get thrown into the mix. How easy is it then to sell the game of rugby to Canadians involved in those other sports?
Well, for me, I've obviously lived it. And so I have a story that is real as a fellow Canadian. But I've had some success as a coach. I've had some success as recruiting, but I think my number one thing is finding that talent. And a lot of time we get foreign coaches that come to North America, and they say like, yeah, Bruce, he's a good athlete, but he doesn't know how to pass, or he doesn't know the game. And it's like, yeah, of course. he's a football player. He's a hockey player. So our job is to find the talent, find the athletes, trick them into playing rugby, and then teach them how to play, right? And then understand like where they're coming from. And I think that for me is like, okay, I understand that athletes, they're crossover athletes. That's what we have here. So this is what we're dealing with. We're, if you come from the UK or Southern Hemisphere or come from a rugby prominent nation, you're like, hey, Bruce is 18. He's been playing rugby for 17 and a half years, right? Great. Right. So for us, it's like Bruce is 18. He's been, it's been snowing for 10 months. The ice is just coming off the farm fields, right? We have 2 weeks to teach him how to play, right? And so for me, after I played for Canada and lived in Vancouver for a few years, the big city, I got flown out to Saskatchewan, the Canadian Prairies, just one province over from off, and I loved it. And what I loved about it was that there was so many powerful, exciting athletes, like fishing where the fish are. They're big, they're strong, they're used to getting run over by cattle, they don't mind cold, they're the perfect athlete. And there's a famous song in come out of Alberta, it's called Small Towns Big Dreams, and that's really about, for me, North Americans. Now we have athletes in the cities. I don't want to disrespect the cities in Canada, but man, if you got to walk, you got to go outside in -40 and do some calving and whatever it is. Like those are the kids you want. And a lot of guys that have played in the NHL for ice hockey, like they're all farmers. You go to New Zealand, they're all farmers. They're tough kids. So for me, it's I always go to the small towns. So and then I just recently, it's not really out there yet, but I'm going to be working with USA Rugby contracting to help find the gold medalist women for the 2028 LA Sevens. And good on the US to get a crazy Canadian coach to hit the road. But I just get in I'll go anywhere. And for me, I'm a passionate, loyal Canadian. I got 2 maple leafs on my body, but I mean, for me, it's all about, like you say, that there's not just one way to the top or one way for opportunities. And, every time I connect with a kid or a person, it's like, I don't ever take it for granted, because I know what it's like to be at the bottom of that elevator and to not know there's a world out there, to understand the fact that, like, these kids that are coming in my camp today, they have no idea about the World Series. They have no idea about Six Nations, World Cup. They have no idea about the friendships, the fact, this global community that's out there. And so I understand what it's like. I remember rocking up to my first session, Bruce, and it's like, this coach with thighs on him the size of my body and shorts, it was like the early 90s. So shorts up high. And I'm like, what is this? No pads. And this is crazy. So whenever I go to a new session, I realize these kids are like, okay, this coach's shorts are too high. He's crazy. Like, what are we doing? No pads. So you have to put yourself in their shoes, right? But the number one thing is it's obviously that experience. And one thing that I've realized this year more than ever is you take the time to talk to somebody and you tell them about some opportunities, you tell them they can. It is the most powerful thing. And as much as I've had blessed with the most amazing mentors and coaches on the West Coast, because like anybody that's played for Canada that's from elsewhere, like basically stays on the island for the most part. So I've had a lot of great guides, but I really only needed 1 or 2 like that really told me I could. And like, by say they changed my life, they literally just told me I could. 7 easy years later, I did. So it's a beautiful thing. And again, I just come back from 3 stops across the US, and I mean, I don't remember the games. What I remember is just the coffee. And the pictures that I have in my head is just our girls smiling, and that's what I love. So
yeah, I speak to people on here and various others. How many results do you remember from your career? I think I've got 3 in my head where I can tell you the final score, but the head and the heart are full of people you've met, things you've done, places you've been, feelings you had. How then do you get that? I mean, you've got the raw material up there. Canada is pretty rich with the raw material. When are you going to reach that tipping point when rugby becomes not necessarily first choice, but known and then something that people see there's a future in, not necessarily be a pro, but this is somewhere I want to immerse myself in?
That's a tough question and maybe a political question, but if I'll just be honest, like when we have the right person in charge of Canadian rugby, that's willing to get it done, willing to roll up their sleeves and get around the country. Like for me, had I never left Vancouver, I mean, obviously I went to Europe and we can get into that. And I've been working with Mexico and I'm on a plane every day, but actually living in the heart of Canada, actually living on the freezing cold Canadian prairies, I wouldn't understand from a Canadian perspective specifically what it's like to live in Canada, because basically once you get out just outside of Vancouver, an hour or two into the hills, by the hills, I mean the Canadian Rockies, it's a blanket of snow, like for 7-8 months, and it's beautiful, but it's not great for rugby. So I coached indoors for a decade. I started a university program that we coached indoors, and trying to keep people engaged in anything indoors 3-4 days a week, in the gymnasium, with maybe one competition a year. Now that's coaching, but the biggest thing is when I come back to the West Coast now in 2019, coaches or people, decision makers in our sport that have never really lived in those places, don't understand what it's like and don't know where the talent is, right? So I'll give you an example. At the Commonwealth Games 3-4 days ago, 3 girls from Alberta, which is the second province over where Moffat is. Logan Piper debuted for the Commonwealth Games, got tournament player. In one game, she scored 1 try. Kiara Wardley from Vulcan, Alberta, which is, you can imagine, the middle of nowhere, scored 2 tries. And then Chrissy Skirfield from Canmore, Alberta, with the middle of the Rockies. She's 18 years old, just turned 19, my apologies. She scored 5 tries. So 8 tries in one game from 3 Alberta girls. Meanwhile, I'm coaching in a professional league in the US, and I have like 5 Alberta girls and 2 Saskatchewan girls, which is a province over from that, 5 Prairie girls, absolutely dominating this professional league and on debut. And most of them are under 20 years old. So I'm telling them, like, the talent is in across Alberta. And honestly, I don't think Moffat's been given enough credit for that, because he was the director for Rugby Alberta after he was the assistant coach of the national team. And the best thing that happened to Alberta is he moved into that role after being a national team coach, because he could actually focus. He was on the ground, and the byproduct of that is so many Alberta kids. Now, the piece about the prairies is that you got British Columbia as the West Coast, and then you got Alberta, and then you got Saskatchewan, Manitoba. So Alberta's has basically 2 major cities and a bunch of small cities, towns. Saskatchewan has 2 smaller cities. Manitoba has Winnipeg, 1 city. So basically, Alberta would have, I don't know, probably 50 times the amount of people playing rugby than Saskatchewan. And Saskatchewan probably have 30 times as many as Manitoba. Manitoba, so it's the same athlete. It's the same part of the world pretty much. I mean, they're massive places, but there's just way more in Alberta, right? So, but you have to go to those places. And when I've done Talent ID for Canada, it's like, hey, you're flying into city A. Most people in any sport would just get off the plane, check in, have a beer, have dinner, go to the event, fly home. Sweet, report, good, do their job. For me, I'm a month out. Hey, Bruce, I'm going to be here in a month. Do you have a bunch of coaches? We could grab a coffee and go over the national team plan and talk about any athletes you have, and get to know them, build relationships, have those conversations. And then also they're going to make sure those other athletes are going to be at that camp or that testing event or whatever it is. And then actually do this with them, right? And when I was coaching Mexico, I was consulting for the first 3 years, alongside a couple great Mexican guys. And I was like, there's got to be more talent across Mexico. There's almost more people in Mexico City than all of Canada. Canada's, massive, right? And no, these are the only girls. I'm like, there's no way. There's no way, right? But he was from Mexico City, so he'd never really been out amongst it, right? And so when I took over as coach, I invited girls from different parts of the country. And every time I'd bring in, Bruce from Edinburgh, I'd be like, hey, is there other, I'd have one-on-ones with them. I'd be like, it'd be two-on-ones because I had to get a translator. I'm like, would there be any other athletes like you? Yes, there is. There's this girl. She's 6 foot tall. She's 18 years old. Perfect. I talked to my manager. I put her on a bus that night. She's there the next morning on the field, right? Like no wasting time. And then every time I had like a deal where like we had to bring in 5 girls from 5 different regions of Mexico. And then every time they come in, I would ask the same question you did. I think we're only at question 1 right now, but how did you get into the game? Right? What does your family think? Who's your coach? What is like, how many girls are like, I would just ask and learn. Right. And I think that's the biggest thing. When Damien McGraw was in Canada, he got around the country, get back from winning the Singapore Sevens, which is the only one we've ever won. And you know what? He was on a ferry the next day, or that day, got off the plane, and then he came back and he was guest coaching in the snow up island. So it's like, you have to, it's a fine balance. So as a national team coach to get amongst it, because you have a job to do, but we have the athletes. I've said that since I finished playing for Canada. I mean, that was my why in chasing my dream, was how will I ever be able to get through to these Canadian kids? We have the talent, we have the athletes. I mean, North America is like, size and power, absolutely. But in Canada, we have to go get them. They're under rocks. They're in mountains. They're by the beach. They're wherever, they're on a ski hill. You have to go get them. And like you said, you have to sell them on it.
I absolutely love your passion. So one of the things that I think has allowed you maybe to have this confidence is you disappeared. You took off from Canada. I have this image of you, sort of kit bag on the back with the boots tied, just dangling from a rucksack. Okay, Europe, here I come. How did that come about? What gave you the courage to go and do that?
Oh, that was like 2000, 2001. I mean, I'm from a small town in the Cowichan Valley on Vancouver Island on the east coast of the island. So tucked away in some broken islands. It's beautiful. But I'd never been on a city bus. I'd never been on a train, never nothing. Been fishing since I was 5 days old, kind of thing. And anyway, I fell in love with rugby. And I was looking at schools across the US because, in Canada, you grow up like looking over the fence, like, oh, got to get a scholarship, got to go to the US. Right. And so I was talking to a number of schools, and I was going to go to Oregon or Oregon State. And they had a contact in France, and they were going to sign me. But he's like, hey, one of my colleagues is a vice president of a club in northern France. Would you like to go there? And it was like a year or two after the 99 World Cup where France upset New Zealand. And that really caught my attention pre-internet, that they can play some nice rugby. I'm half Italian, so I'm half crazy and half
Just
wild.
Half?
So
Just half crazy?
Well, full crazy. But, just the way I played, I didn't play like a Canadian, especially in those days. Like I come from a very typical, a Scottish club type, like hard, playing the mud, like it's forwards based, everything's a maul. And then once in a while they get it out to me. And I had, I either had to make it rain or I'd get dropped the next week. And, so for me, it was like, I didn't really fit into this like hard, tough, and my uncles were big and tough. So I didn't really fit into that model. I'd always say like, I wanted to step like the Fijians. I wanted to run like the French. I wanted to pass and kick like an Englishman, right? Like I had to steal bits from everywhere and make it my own. So anyhow, I'm like, yeah, this could be a good fit. And I grew up my mom put us in French immersion because she was Italian. So she wanted us to get another language, and putting your kids in the 80s in another language on the west coast of Canada was quite rare. And so she was pretty happy because my sister's first teaching role was French, and I was playing professionally in France. So she was like, 2 for 2. This is pretty good. So I packed my bags, and well, my dad found out, he's a small town fire chief, and never really left town. Hardworking guy, amazing man, but like he basically called my mom and was like, tell your son he's not going to Europe. Like what is he doing? And my sister was the one that was going to go to Europe. She went to Europe at 12 and she's like, I'm backpacking. I'm like, I want to stay in town and I want to be a school teacher. In the end, she was a school teacher and I'm still a gypsy. So anyway, I got over there. I was scared for my life, Bruce, but got over there. And for those kids out there, we couldn't text and FaceTime and any of that stuff. You wanted to call, it was like empty your bank account to talk to mom for 2 seconds. So I think I flew through the Netherlands and then into Belgium on the French-Belgian border. And these big, scary French guys picked me up on a dark, dreary day. And I was like, okay, I'm getting in the back of the car. And so they said to me, do you want to go sleep? Because I've been traveling for 2 days. Do you want to go to the club and meet people? Or do you want to train? And I was like, I want to train. Like, you haven't slept for 2 days. I want to train. Like, that was home for me, like was on the field. I wanted to go. I was like revving so hot to just get on the field and show France like what I had. So I got out there and we're doing like a warm up and I'm like lapping guys on this warm up. And this big big Aussie that was there. He's 6'7", Monty King. And he was like in his late 20s. He'd been on the road for a while playing around clubs and just picking his favorite countries really. And his head pops out of the crowd like a big giraffe. And he's like, you might want to slow down. These chain smoking Frenchmen are not going to be very happy with you. So even when we did fitness, like I would roast, like that was my deal. Like I only had one gear and I would, if we were doing there and back, I'd be done like 10 minutes before everybody. And our coach was this old guy, Michel Cremachi, was his old French prop. And he'd get so mad at me at the fitness test because he's just like, you're fitness. He'd just be like, you just need to do less, do less. Be like us, do less. And and then just to wrap that up, he asked, he was going to sign me for the next year. And I said, well, if I come back to Europe, I want to go to Italy. My mom's from there. I want to experience my culture, and there's no Italians on Vancouver Island. So that whole Jersey Shore, like North American Italian thing, I didn't grow up with that. I had a Canadian father, but I was just used to, overeating and people talking over each other. So that was kind of my experience. And so it was pretty disorganized when I went to France, and I didn't have an agent. I was organizing it all myself. It was, barely maybe dial-up internet to research stuff. And so they didn't have a lot of stuff sorted for me, like as far as like visas and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, I'm going to get my stuff tight for Italy. So I said, fly me down. So they flew me down before I came back to Canada for the summer to sort out my school, to sort out my visa, sort out my works. Like I wanted everything tight this year because I learned. Well, I had the best week trip in Italy I ever had, drank a bunch of wine, got fed, got wined and dined. I mean, I trained with the team a bit, but he didn't even look at me because he was just so focused. Like he was, like a lot of coaches, they're focused on the weekend games. And so I'm like, oh, I'll come back for the summer. I got like 6 months. We'll get this dialed. No problem. And well, they still don't have anything dialed because the Italians, like, God bless them, they're on Italian time. Like their only word that I learned in Italian was domani, which means tomorrow. Right. So But I had an amazing experience, met my family, and my Italian Nonna, my Italian grandmother, lives in Canada, of course, but she was over there visiting, and she wanted to make sure I got adjusted while there. So I didn't play the first month because I slightly tore my Achilles right before, like the day before I got on the plane. And they basically had a gun to my head, like, you need to perform. And I was a goal kicker, Bruce. So they're like, we got to see you kick. So I literally had to take crutches out to the field in the fog in Ferrara, Italy, right? And it's right in kind of the swampy region of the armpit of Italy at nighttime under the lights. And my Nonna was like, she's the most amazing, like she's a picture-esque like Nonna, but she's basically cussing this guy out while I'm kicking goals in the dark with my crutches. He didn't really like, if you saw me kick if you saw somebody kick once, you'd know whether they could kick, right? Like out of hand or off a tee or whatever. This guy didn't really know. So he made me kick 15 balls and he was like almost giggling. I went 14 for 15. My Nonna, as I'm walking out the field, is cussing this guy out. So I ended up, they basically told me I had to play or they were sending me home because they want to fly half. And of course, this guy didn't look at me when I was there earlier, 6 months prior, and I was ready to go. So I was like, okay. So I played the third game of the year, the first home game. And then we were playing on Sundays. And this mafia guy, I swear he's a mafia guy, calls me on a Saturday night. And I'm just like this super keen Canadian kid. Like, I'll go through a wall. You want me to go through a wall? I'll go through a wall. I'll jump over that building. I'll do a million push. Like, whatever you wanted me to do, like, I'm good to go. Calls me at like 10:30 at night. I'm already sleeping. And he's like, we really need to win tomorrow. And I'm like, yeah, like, for sure. Like, let's go. We really need you to kick your goals. Like, da. It's like, if you don't, like, you're going home, basically. I'm like, Jesus. But if you do, I'll give you a pile of cash. And I'm like, what? I'd never even thought of cash. I mean, I was getting paid some, but I was like, bonuses and stuff. I was like, whoa, this is weird. Like, this guy's going to give me like $400 or whatever if I have a good game. I'm like, this totally is like kissing your sister. I do this for love. You know what I mean? Like, what the hell is this? So anyway, I played my first game, and it was just one of those games where like just nothing was happening, you know, like it was pretty close. They scored in the first 5 minutes. They were up by 5 points. And then it was like second half of the game, and I was playing fly half, and I'm like, I need to make something happen. Like, I need to show them what I have. I need to make something happen. And there was like last play of the game. We're inside our like 22, the old 2-3 fake, the old fake, and go through a hole, went 90 meters, put away this guy they call Superman. He scores in the corner, lands on the ball. It was like a signature move. He'd always do this big dive, but he wasn't very coordinated. So he always land on the ball and knock himself out. We had like a highlight reel of it. But anyway, he scores in the corner. I hit the kick from the sideline, 7-5. And it was in the Italian like sports highlights for like 2 weeks. And you see me running down the field, and you see my Italian Nona outside the fence, because in Italy, like, it's always fenced off. And she's like running down the fence line. So she made more like, so then like the Italian news would just like, they would start on me, and then they would just finish on her the whole way. They not knowing she was my Nona or whatever. But it was such a wonderful experience, because my Italian grandfather my Nona was actually like a famous Italian boxer before he moved to Canada. And if you like, when I would drop his name, people know who he is. They know the last name. And there was some Italian boxing team that competed in Canada, like 7-8 years ago. And I was like, hey, my Italian grandfather like was, you know, apparently a legendary boxer. And I started saying his first name, Vincenzo, and they said Alberti. Like, they knew exactly who he was. So yeah, it was pretty cool for my family, full circle, that I was then, you know, he passed the year I was born, but the fact that I went back to the motherland and was playing sports. And then after that, I said, you know, I wanted to play for Canada, get an education. And so I was going to get signed by Rovigo in the top 10. But I thought, you know what, I want to go play for Canada. And that kind of started my journey. So I don't get asked that the European stuff, but man, it was a wild ride, you know, 20 years ago or so, for a kid that had really like never seen the world. And here I am now at 43 in 2022. And, you know, I roomed with Serevi last week. And I remember looking at him on my first tour in Dubai, South Africa. We were in South Africa, and we were waiting to fly from George to Johannesburg. And we all of a sudden had an 11-hour layover. It was like a 45-minute flight. And then I had to fly 8-9 hours to Dubai, 8-9 hours to London, 8-9 hours to Toronto, and then the West Coast and the island, right? So it was like just it was like our first little 11 hours. And I was pretty gassed on my first trip. But I'm looking over at Serevi, who was a player coach then in his late 30s. Obviously, like, you know, wow, like, he's my hero. But I was like, dude, how many planes has this guy been on? You know what I mean? Like, how many planes has this guy been on? And he's just chilling. I'm like, I better chill, because he's chill. And then I was rooming with him last week, and I've played against him on the circuit. I've played against him after our circuit days. I've coached against him. I've coached with him. I've coached at many different tournaments. Like, I was coaching Trinidad. He was coaching Jamaica a couple weeks ago. I was obviously coaching Mexico. He was coaching Bermuda. Like, we've been on the trail a lot together. And anyway, we're sharing a hotel room last week. And we were sitting there the other day having a coffee. And I was like, man, I looked at you like 20 years ago, and I was like, man, how many planes is that guy? And I said, I think I've almost caught up now. He started laughing.
So you get to your. I must have passed you in the air because I went to Albany and played for the Knickerbockers in Albany about the same time you were heading the other way, I think. But I did it easy. I went somewhere where they spoke the lingo, and I was going to fit in. The tradition up here in the UK is you head to Aussie or Kiwi to get your have your season and get your kicks for a while, and some stay and do well, and some come back. What then made you think right now's the time for Canada? Did the Canadian Union know what you were up to? Were they tracking you, or were you just going rogue?
Well, really the only people that went and played professionally were the guys playing for Canada. And I knew just slugging it out in our league on the coast wouldn't really get me to the next level. So at the time there's a Canadian Super League, and everybody will say it's the best thing that ever happened to Canadian rugby as far as the men's game goes. So basically each region had a elite team in the summer, because again, across Canada, they actually obviously play in the summer, and then on the West Coast we play the same season in Scotland and the UK would, which is throughout the winter. So it's actually quite a good league, and that would be kind of a pathway. Now, when I got back from France, I went to my first Super League trial, and I remember coming back from that practice, and I had a '99 World Cup poster on my wall, and every guy that was there was in that poster except for me. But because I'd gone away, they're like, wow, this guy, I was the only guy playing pro in France or whatever and going to Italy. So they were like, all right. So yeah, that definitely helped me. And the biggest thing is, it's like I slept in a different bed. I ate different food. I played with different guys. I played against different guys. I wasn't familiar with the grounds. I wasn't familiar with the refs. I didn't know how to get there, wherever we went. I remember being in Italy and being like, hey, who's this Raposo? Where's Raposo? Where's this, who's this Raposo we're playing next weekend? They're like, Raposo means break. We don't play next weekend. Oh, so that was a good one. But yeah, no, I mean, it's, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And then, by the time I got to the World Series, which obviously took me a long time, it wasn't my first rodeo, as we say in North America. So, but when I figured it was time, there was a gentleman named Gregor Dixon, who was the captain of the Canadian Sevens. He was also in the back row for the 15s. He was playing in the top league in southern France while I was in France, and we would have a call every Sunday. And he's from my home club. And he would come back from when we were both at Couch, and he'd come back from these World Series stops or pre-World Series stops, I guess maybe at that point, with these magazines, right? And that was the Google for the kids now. That was the Google. These magazines, tournament magazines, and they were on our club. And I'd be like flipping through them. There'd be like 40, 50,000 people in costumes. You get this whole, when I said earlier, these kids don't know what's out there. I didn't know what was out there. To me, the show is like hockey or the World Series for baseball or whatever. When I saw that, I was like, this looks like rugby heaven. I want to do that. Right. And then Gregor would take off. I was just a small town kid. And, I was in the stable, and this guy's going off and riding, and he would come back. I'm like, where were we? I was here. I was there. I was Kuala Lumpur. I was UK. I was like, wow, I want to do that. And so when we were in France, I was obviously playing National One, and he was in the top league, and we talk every Sunday. But the interesting thing was, he said, I'm jealous of you. And I said, why is that? He goes, well, you speak French. He goes, I'm not having the same experience as you. I'm having a good experience, and Gregor's quite a charismatic guy. He's quite cool and has a good dry joke and but even just understanding. And he just said, I'm at a loss. I pick up some words on the field, but I understand what the guys would be talking about, having a beer, and I'd like to, throw a joke in there, but he goes, I can't. So our experience, it's never greener on the other side. I'm thinking wow, this guy's killing it. He's playing in the top league. I want to be like him. And he's like, man, you actually are, getting a way better experience than me, which was kind of cool. But anyhow, I asked him one of these Sunday calls, and it took me 5-6 Sundays to build it up. But do you think I can play for Canada? And Gregor's the kind of guy that's not going to bullshit you, right? He's a big back rower. He's and he knew me all the way through. So he thought about it. Like it was just awkward silence for like I would say it felt like 5 minutes, but it might have been 40 seconds. And he was genuinely thinking about it. And he just said, like, yes, you can. That's all I needed. He said, but it's going to be a long road for you. He said, you've got a step like nobody else. You got the fitness, you got the work rate. But he's like, you're not a big guy, and like you need to hustle hard, and it's going to take a long time, and expect the ups and expect the downs, like you were saying with the pathway piece. So that's all I needed, though, Bruce. That's all I needed. He set me on a trajectory of no quit. And if he would have said no, then I probably would have believed it. So yeah, I mean, shout out to Gregor for lying to me or maybe believing in me, one of the two. So, and that's what I say to kids or adults all the time. It's like, I think you can do it. But I said, even if I said, if the guy down the street says you can't, or whoever, it doesn't matter. It's really up to you. And then you find some people that will tell you can. So that after that, I was like, yeah, I got to get back to Vancouver Island, and I got to get on the hunt, and that's what I did.
So you get back to Canada, having had an experience like that. Were the feet still itchy? Did you need it to happen tomorrow? Did you need it to happen today? Were you frustrated? Were you anxious? Were you nervous? How did it work? Because I always feel that going away and seeing what it's like somewhere else, and then you come back and maybe you don't get the reaction you want. Is that how you found it?
No, I mean, I describe it as this, Bruce. For 6-7 years, every day I woke up in the morning, every time I got out of bed, and I did get out of bed super early at that time, but when I got out of bed, it was literally like the wind wasn't in my sails. It was a full gust, a full gale wind at my back. I wanted it so bad. I was on the hunt so hard that you could tell me I suck. You could trip me. You could throw spears at me. No way. I'm coming through. I was Braveheart. Like there's no stopping me. This is what I wanted. I was super positive and passionate. And, I kept it close to me, because some people found out about it and I didn't broadcast it, but they would try and, cut you down. But no, I absolutely had no like reservations. I was hungry. I was up for the challenge. I mean, I talk about it a lot. Vancouver Island, I run a full-time academy with 35 kids from around the world. And like, this is the New Zealand of the North. Like we have hills and mountains for days, fresh, the best water in the world. Like, we have the cleanest air. Like this is a breeding ground for rugby players. So we're quite fortunate there. And I had a training ground outside my door. But my first trial, this is amazing. So it was actually like Canada West versus Scotland 15s game at the University of Victoria on Vancouver Island in Victoria. And Doug Tate, Doug was he was a sevens coach. He was a technical director. He's developed like over 60 Canadian sevens international. He's got this thing when he retired last year, and it's like all the guys that come through his university program. And he's my favorite guy. Like I just try and coach like him, just make him sweat and make him smile. That's the model. But also, definitely have a plan. And I yelled at him. I yelled at him from this game after the game, because he was help executing the event, because it was at his university. And I said, hey, I want to play sevens for Canada. Like, when can I come practice? He's like, come tomorrow. We have a practice. I was like, okay. So I showed up the next day. Now, they had like open trials. Sometimes it'd be 70, 90 guys. They would have, closed trials, like long listed guys. Then they would have like the 30 guys, and then non-travel, traveling team and non-travelers. This was the traveling. This was like the Manchester Commonwealth Games team, the 12, like Winston, Stanley, like all the legends, the old guys, right? And Winston, like a week or two before, just broke the Canadian record of 50 tries in test matches in Chicago. And anyhow, I show up to this field, and it's locked. The doors are locked. Like there's an actual lock on the door of the gate. So I just climbed the fence. And Dougie, being a beauty, like I don't think he actually invited me. He was like, "Oh yeah, just come." Like that's how he is. "Oh yeah, sure, just show up." It was closed. It was like they're traveling like the next day to Manchester. Climb the fence, and these guys are like, "Who the hell is this guy? Like, who is this guy?" Right? Just in my club socks and my, whatever, my one pair of shorts, likely from high school at that time. And the first guy to come up to me was Winston Stanley. And hi, I'm Winnie. Nice to meet you. What's your name? And I was like, that is class. He was one of the best players in the world at that time, in his prime. Some of the fringe guys, the younger guys, were kind of like, who's this guy? So for me, like when I became one of the guys, it's the first thing I've always, or I still do, like we're guest coaching I'm coaching the Premier Sevens last week, and there's some new coaches or new managers that are in the mix. The first thing I do, and like you can tell, they're just coming in with so much energy. Much like when Surevi, I mean, I can't put myself Surevi's level, of course, but Surevi came up to me my first tournament, and just took away all that pressure because he recognized that this was my first cap. And although that he was the best in the world at that time, he missed the feeling of it being his first tournament. And so for me, I always try and get rid of that nervous anxiousness. But anyhow, I was not invited to my first thing, and I climbed the fence. And, 5, 6, 7 years later, I made my debut. So, yeah, I mean, I nobody worked harder. I'll say nobody worked harder than me. And so I figured I deserved it. And I almost hung it up after 6 years of trying. I was a non-traveling reserve for every stop leading up to the 2005 World Cup. And like the only one that was at the camps. Like we had closed like 2-week camps. It was the first time they'd ever done that. And I'd get invited. And I had all the kit except for the jersey. And they never give out the kit unless you've been capped. Like they just don't. But I was just like so close. So after the Wellington Sevens and Wellington LA 7 stops. So they went to Wellington. I was at that pre-camp. They went to Wellington. And then I went to LA with my University Victoria. And so we were there watching them. So we get there on the Friday night. And it's a university trip. And we're the top university in Canada, but the guys are on the piss. And a lot of them are like 15s guys, some 7s, other 7s, bubble guys, and they're having beers. But I'm like, I'm this close to finally, I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not going to be that guy. I can't be that guy. So we go to the tournament the next day. The boys are on it the night before. They're on it that morning, of course. The university guys are on tour. We don't play for like 5 days, so they're having a good time. And I always say normal people do normal things. The normal thing to do would have been crush beers. I wasn't normal. I was enjoying myself. So I'm up in this booth visiting my elementary school teacher, the first lady, Miss Dick, because they put a ball in my hand. And she's up there watching with some other people from where we're from. And she said, like, they're all talking about like, hey, like, I hear you're pretty close to, cracking the national team squad and da-da-da. I'm really proud of you. You're still playing and da-da-da, right? And I was just starting to make a name for myself kind of thing. And one of our athletic therapists for the university comes running up to this booth. Where's Robin? Like you're going in. And then we're at the LA Sevens. And I'm like, what do you mean you're going in? Like, have you been drinking beers? No, I have not been drinking beers. Like, I didn't think so. Spence is looking for you. Spence Robinson, our assistant coach, is looking for me. She's like, you better go back down to the stands and hang out with the boys because Spence is going to come looking for you. Shane, who then was my coach, Shane at the time was on his way out from playing. He'd been injured in Wellington and it wasn't clear for LA. So you're in. Sluggo wants you, the famous Rick Sudgett. So I go back.
A legend. I met him in Hong Kong. Great guy.
Larger than life. So we go down to the stands and I'm sucking on a bottle of water, and all the boys now have been on the piss for like 2 hours and they all know I'm like getting the nod. So they're all just like hyping me up. And so Spence Robinson comes out from the end of the tunnel, comes up into the stands. And in LA, like early in the day, they block out like no people in the end of the stands. They want it for TV. They just want you on either side, right? As people filter in. So you just see this man walking along the end of the thing and looking for me. And I'm like, no way, like, no way. And comes over. He's like, you got your kit? I'm like, yes, I do. He's like, of course you do. I'm like, it's at my hotel. So I give him my key to go get my kit. And he goes, come with me. So go to the players section. And then like the boys and the Sevens team are all hyped up. So we're getting ready for warm up. I was going to debut at halfback against the U.S. in the U.S., last game of the day under the lights in Los Angeles. Like it was, storybook, right? And the boys are more excited for Rudy over here than themselves. And right before kickoff, Rick Sluggo comes over to me and he goes, the IRB guy just said your name had to be on the list last night by 11. So you're out. But the next tour is the Sevens World Cup in Hong Kong. So we'll take Shane to that, and then the Hong Kong Singapore leg will be split up. So we'll go to Singapore, and you'll lead that team. You'll likely captain that team or lead that team, because we're going to blood new guys after that World Cup. And anyhow, over that time, Sluggo became 15's head coach, right? And so he just used the rest of the year to basically blood guys for the 15's program. I didn't go to Singapore. I didn't go to London, France. That Spence guy called me, and he'd been in my corner. He's like, listen, you've had a good run, right? And I had the fitness, like top fitness scores. I was top scorer in the Premier League here. I was top scorer in our Super League. Like, I was crushing the trials. Like, I was there. You know, when at first I was a raw animal, then I was like, you know, and he's like, you know, you should be really proud of yourself. Just like if you've ever watched Rudy, like it was basically the same story. Like, you've hung in there with the best. So I'm like, don't hold your head, blah, blah, blah. And I got off the phone and I just let it go. Like, I just bawled. I just was just like so mad at myself more than anything. I was just like, you know, I'm going to be having a pint saying I woulda, coulda, shoulda, whatever. And then I woke up the next morning like a rocket, right? And so I called Sluggo and I said, listen, I said, I may have done more than everybody else, but you're right. I haven't done as much as I possibly could. I wasn't as big and strong as I could. He goes, well, the problem is, like, because I was as a summer student, because I was in university, that I would work for our town, and I would be laying pipe. I'd be in the ditch. I'd be on a shovel. I'd be working my butt off for 10 hours. So I'm burning calories. And then I would drive an hour and a half to Victoria for our Super League practice. And I'd drive back every day, do the gym, do it again. So I was just burning fat and burning time. So he didn't want me to play in the Super League, but that year they had a Super League team up island, they were terrible. We had a lot of fun, but I was able to like eat more, hit the gym. So I was pushing like 245 at like 155 pounds, like 160 pounds. Like, I was throwing weight and doing everything. I would work every day. So I'd go work in the ditch. I'd get off. I'd drive to my mom's downtown. I'd run 15, 20 minutes to the gym. I'd work out for an hour. I'd go run around my town, which is all hills. I do an hour of hill running around my town. And then I'd run to the biggest hill. And it's like the Lion King when they say Mufasa. Because when I talk about the name of this hill with kids in my town, it's like a 5-minute drive like this. I would sprint up at six times. And then I would go to the track and do speed workouts. It's the worst training plan ever, right? You do speed at the end of being gassed, right? But I just destroyed myself. I was bigger, stronger, faster. And then mentally, you could not push me. You could not push me over any wall. And so when I went to that trial that fall, well, Sluggo basically said, you know, the Commonwealth Games are in Melbourne in March. He goes, you should be in that team. And he'd moved away from the sevens team. And that's all I needed was that from him. And I went to the trial that fall with a new coach. And there was 15 selectors, and all 15, I still have the email, ranked me number one, every single one of them. And the rest is history. And the weird thing about it is I had told people for 7-8 years how I was going to score my first try. Like, I dreamt it. This is how it's going to happen. As a halfback, I was going to go around the side. I was going to chip over the sweeper, and I was going to score into the post and kiss a maple leaf. And when the thing went off, it was an outer body experience, in that, like, I didn't think about it. It just happened. And then I played like 100 games in the World Series, Bruce. And I would never kicked it again. Like, I would never have the balls once to ever do that. Like, I was never that. I was just a connect guy. Like, they programmed me, like, just set up. I had the best step ever, but I barely ever brought it out. Like, it was just like, I would buzz around and control the game and connect, do my job. But anyway, that moment happened, and that's where the Dream Believe Succeed started. So.
And it's quite a story. When you're on the World Series, I've spoken to a lot of sevens guys, and I don't know if you watch The Simpsons, but there's an episode of The Simpsons where this yo-yo team come to the school, and the next day all the kids are on the yo-yos, but the yo-yo sort of dream team gets stuck in a van and then taken away to the next school, and it's just this road trip. You guys share the same flights, the same hotel, the same buses. The final night, you all go for beers. You get to know each other. how much did you get out of that sort of roadshow experience?
Like for me, I think I got more out of it than a lot of people, definitely the Canadians. Because I had already spent some time in Europe and I'd been out of my comfort zone, and I was I was the biggest fan of the World Series before I played on the World Series. Like when I scored my first try, I knew how to dive and look cool and all that. The boys are like, "What's like? Where'd you learn this stuff?" I'm like, "I've been watching VHS like for years." Um, I knew all the players and all that. So for me, I was the biggest fan when I was on the World Series. I was the biggest fan, and still to this day, I'm the biggest fan. Um, and so for me, I never took a moment for granted. So we would hang out with Fijians. We'd have Kava sessions with the Fijians. We got along with the Scots and the Welsh really good. I spoke French, so there's a couple guys in on the French team I connected with. Outside of Ben Gollings, the English guys were not class on the World Series, and I will not be shy about that. Now they are. But in that era, they were just a little too posh. But that was one thing about Ben. We connected our first Dubai Sevens, and he was a cutout in Dubai, which is the Arabian England, and he was class. Like here's an English guy at the peak of his career that just got MVP and won another Dubai Sevens, and was just like just a solid dude. And when you get to know his story, he's actually been quite humbled a number of times, and we're still friends to this day. But yeah, absolutely. I did not take one of those seconds for granted. And I remember being like when we flew from Dubai to South Africa, my first like travel day with all the teams. And it was the cool thing about those flights is in that day they had all the World Series stops from the year before. So I'm in between World Series stops and I'm watching more rugby on these United Arab Emirates flights, right? And I'm sitting around the Springboks or the Blitz box, and I'm watching like their highlights. They won like the tournament of the year, like the year before, or whatever. It was super surreal, but it is so amazing. And obviously the thing that I love about the World Series is like, you could be watching England knock it on and Scotland scores, or Canada, USA, like nobody really cares in the stands. It's just jouet. Whereas when you have two countries battling in any sport and anything, or two teams, it's right or wrong. It's black or white. It's good and evil, whatever. Whereas like this World Series is that special. And the Premier Sevens in the US is even another level, because you're actually rooming, like for the first two legs, I roomed with Andrew Locke, which is who we played in the Cup final. Former USA player and coach. You're actually rooming with the opposition, coaches. Like it's like another level outside of sharing a bed. I mean, and it's so it's so class that way. And some of my best friends in the world are guys I played against on the World Series, and and then now in our 30s and 40s, we've got to coach against each other. Like it's pretty cool. And then most recently, like Kelly Griffin, a USA Olympian and legend captain, I've been coaching with her with our Premier Sevens team, and like I coached Mexico against her on the World Series and at Olympic qualifying events. And now I'm working with her and we're sharing Sluggo stories, and we got matching tattoos because we won last year. So it is a family for sure.
I love it, and I don't think you get that in a sport. I can't imagine two hockey coaches sharing a room. But I know you've got some jobs to do. I'm also a massive Ben Gollings fan. He was awesome when he came on the pod, lovely guy. But you've got some work to do. And I think I've already stolen more of your time than I need. I think what I'm going to say to you is, would you please come back and can we do part 2? Because I feel like there's still a whole load that we can get into. Thanks for your passion and enthusiasm. I did give you about 30 seconds of notice before we hit record. So, Robin, after all you've told us, I'm intrigued by this one. Please finish the sentence for me. For you, happiness is?
Yeah, like, can I have an on-field and an off-field?
Go for it. Go for it. You can have as much as you like.
Yeah, I'll say for me, happiness for me is either being on the back of a horse in the Canadian open prairies, riding wide open, or obviously being on the West Coast with my wife and dog, sleeping on a boat and and enjoying the Pacific Ocean. Happiness for me in and around the sport is seeing my athletes live their own dream, believe, succeed, seeing them win and smile. And my favorite moment of my life is when Mexico qualified for the World Cup, and that feeling I can't even describe. And I've had so many. I've been spoiled with so many wonderful moments in my life. I feel like Forrest Gump with the lives I've lived, but with with that Mexican group, because it's living your own dream, believe, succeed is so selfish and wonderful, but helping other people around the world fall in love with the game and climb mountains and inspire the next generation. And because those women did that and made history, there's more girls now playing the sport of rugby, girls and women, in Mexico than all the Americas, from Canada, US, all the way down to Chile. And for me, yeah, happiness is for me is growing the game.
I've absolutely loved speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time and energy. Now you need to go and inspire some more kids.
Yeah, I wanted to have this in the morning because I knew it'd fire me right up for getting to work with 40 crazy Canadian kids. So it's been an absolute honor, and big supporter of your pod, and looking forward to catching up in person one time.
I'm going to hold you to that. Thank you, Robin.
Cheers.
That was joy. That's probably the least I have ever spoken on a pod, but when you've got a man with that energy, enthusiasm and passion and that many stories to tell, we have not got anywhere close. I don't think we've even scratched the surface. I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did. You can catch us on Acast, Apple, and Spotify. You can watch on Facebook and YouTube. Leave us a review. Tell your friends. Bring them into the body of the Kirk. Let them hear all about the Happiness Is podcast. I have had a very, very enjoyable hour, and I hope you have too. My name is Bruce Aitchison from the Happiness Is podcast, and my happiness is egg-shaped. Until the next time, look after yourself.